Is everyone ready to talk science of selling, science of SDR right now? All right, fantastic. Wonderful. We're not gonna have any any after lunch food comas. Okay, so the goal of this panel is to really get into some tactical, actionable insights regarding instrumentation of sales development and how to be analytically excellent with respect to that. Conveniently, we have some analytically excellent humans up here with me. We're going to go through a couple of introductions here and give you guys some context, and then we'll get into the meat of things. So first, we'll go through here. Give me your name, your title, and then the size of your current SDR team or former SDR team, and the inbound-outbound split. So we'll do that first. Go.
Okay. So Lars Nielsen, most people know me as the former VP of Inside Sales at Cloudera. There I had a team of about 55 SDRs. Obviously you start a lot smaller, so we had a hybrid team. That team went to about 20 SDRs in the United States before we specialized. And that team turned into 3 separate teams, 1 dedicated to inbound and 2 dedicated to outbound. And that was after we segmented into strategic, enterprise, and SMB, our national sales organization. The 2 other teams were in EMEA in Budapest and in Singapore in Asia Pac. And those never got big enough for us to specialize, so they were hybrid teams, meaning managing inbound and doing outbound.
Killer. Okay, Mitch.
Awesome, great. My name is Mitch Tois. I'm the head of sales development for a company called Apollo.io. We have a team of 6 SDRs right now, 5 of which are in an outbound motion, and then 1 of which we just recently moved into a hybrid inbound role, following up with marketing qualified leads and then also managing drift, which we've just implemented as well, so that's going great. Previously to me joining Apollo, I had actually originally been working out of Atlanta, Georgia with a small company called SalesLoft. Some of you guys might be familiar with who they are. Fantastic company, and that's where I got essentially my PhD in inside sales. And then I jumped over to a company called Gladly, which was in the enterprise customer service software space. So we sold B2B, but to B2C companies. And then 6 months ago, I joined Apollo.io, and future looks pretty bright.
Got it. And then, Lars, before Cloudera, you were at ArcSight, right?
ArcSight, yeah.
Which is enterprise search, or no?
No, ArcSight was a security instance and event management.
Okay,
log
got
management.
it. So more like geeky IT stuff. Okay. So, Brandon.
Hey everyone, Brandon Bornancin, CEO and founder of Seamless.ai. Got started in sales when I was a freshman in college. Launched an online sales and marketing company that did $1 million my freshman year, $3 million my sophomore year, and $6 million my junior year for online poker when online poker was huge. Then they made online poker illegal, and I wasn't making any more money.
That sucked.
But it bought me a 2-door Mercedes convertible at like 18 and property in Florida and all that other jazz. So once that crashed, ended up selling for IBM and a Google search agency. And when I was selling for IBM and Google, I needed to go from prospecting 20, 30, 40 people a day to prospecting 1,000 people a day. And had a very hard time doing that. And so we built a search engine to find your total addressable market instantly and 10x our income, became millionaires, and realized if we could do it, you could do it. So now we're broke again because we took all the money that we made into building Seamless.ai to help you maximize revenue and increase sales. Our SDR and AE team right now is 5 and 5, and we just closed our seed round to scale. We bootstrapped for about 1.5 years. So we're going to go from 5 AEs and SDRs to 20 AEs and SDRs over the course of the next 12 months.
Cool. And then who do you guys, what are the titles that you sell into, and what's your average contract value?
So our ICP is anyone that buys Salesforce.com with 50 employees or greater in the US. There's about 22,000 ideal companies that we're targeting right now in a number of verticals, mainly selling to VPs, directors of sales, sales development, and also marketing.
And the ASP is around?
ASP is around 12,000.
Okay, got it. And then you guys right now are selling into?
Yeah, we sell to directors of sales development, heads of sales, directors of sales, all the different personas that are trying to work really hard to get their team to sell whatever they're selling, sell better. And we go as high up into the enterprise space and the mid-market and the SMB space as well. And so all the different iterations of titles that come with those different segments, we make a concentrated effort to touch all of them as much as possible.
ASP is around?
It ranges, it depends. Anything from 10, 15, all the way up to
cool.
6
So
figure
these are
deals.
kind of like mid-market-y, like higher velocity. Lars? Titles and targets for Cloudera and ASP?
Yeah, we were lucky at Cloudera. When we started our outbound account-based approach, the personas that we identified came out of what we had indexed and cataloged in our CRM in the deals we had won before. And they were anything from chief data officer to anyone with data architecture in their title to anyone with big data in their title.
Okay.
And at a really big company, if you do a search and you scrape a data provider, you could literally find hundreds of people with those very specific personas in these very big titles. So for us, one to many was not 1 to 5. It in some companies was 1 to 100, 1 to 200 people.
So you didn't necessarily know where you would like catch a seam and got it. And then the ASPs? Not that big.
Well, yeah, I would say 50 to 75 for an initial deal. But if we didn't get to 6 and 7 figures within 1 to 2 years in our renewal upsell process, those customers were not profitable.
Got it. Okay. So it's like the reason why I wanted to provide that context for folks is such that you all can understand like, oh, okay, cool. Like my go-to-market is more like Mitch's, or my go-to-market is more like Lars's. There'll probably be cross applicability, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone had that context and kind of knew where everyone was coming from. And I guess kind of background for me, I run the sales operations enablement and leadership community, Modern Sales. That doesn't have a sales component, but I guess our ICP is sales operations enablement and leadership folks. It doesn't have an ASP associated with it. But previously, I was the first sales rep, or founder, and then eventually the first sales rep at TalentBin, and then our sales manager, sales leader, and we were acquired by Monster. But importantly, I think our ASP was like 10K. We were selling into recruiters because you could only sell you could sell 1 seat to them, you could sell 5 seats to the organization or what have you. It was very high velocity, so it was pretty substantially different than like a Cloudera sales motion. But I think we had 8 SDRs and 8 AEs when we were acquired by Monster. So that'll give you guys context there. Okay, cool. So science versus art in SDR. What do you think? Is it more science? Is it more art? Does it really depend on your market or your segment within that market, SMB versus enterprise? Or are some parts of it science and some part of it art? So Mitch, you've kind of been around the block in a number of different modern sales organizations recently. Let's start with you. How do you think about SDR science and art?
Sure. It's an interesting question, and I've been thinking a little bit about it. And I think the best answer I can come up with is you want to picture the science on one hand, and you want to picture the art on the other hand, and think about this as a balance. And then the best sales processes are the ones that actually walk a narrow path between those two. And I think if you have a sales process devoid of either, you're missing opportunities. And so it's important, I think, if you're going to start at least with a science, form a hypothesis, write down what you expect to happen, and then begin testing that and creating iterations of that. And then from there, where you have gaps, you can look to add additional science, layers of science to that. Or then maybe that's where some of the art comes in, which is maybe more some of the communication and how things are done and how things are said, how things are measured. And so I think it's important to do both. It's important to be conscientious of both, and not only two separately, but also how the two are related, and then try your best to walk that narrow path and develop a sales process that actually is balanced between the two.
What about in the enterprise? Lars, what do you think?
So I think science has dominated sales and marketing for the last 5 to 10 years, and we've almost gotten to the point where we're choking on the science. David started the morning off by showing us just the tool stack with SDRs. If you've seen that slide for sales and marketing, it's 10 to 20x that large of vendors that are throwing their science at you. And certainly we've made huge strides in generating demand if you can orchestrate, coordinate, and integrate that science And I think that's where the art comes in. Sales operations, sales enablement. These are functions that have become, I think the rock stars of this generation are the operators that are connecting the science. And they are able to create the kinds of playbooks and motions and rhythms that allow SDRs to do what they do. And so, yes, the science, I mean, again, I'm a baby boomer. And the technology that I was given, I started my career as an SDR for Xerox Corporation. My title was Account Marketing Representative. I was an AMR. And they gave me a liquid crystal pager. So that when I was out in the field and an inbound lead came in, my manager could page me on my pager so I could drive to a Denny's and put 2 dimes in and call my manager and have her tell me where I should call next. I mean, that was the technology. So to wake up in today's world with, at the touch of within a couple of seconds, you can have a list of 1,000 personas that are hyper relevant to the problem that you can solve for them. It's the stuff legends are made of.
So Brandon, what do you think, what parts are important to be scientific and what parts are important to be artistic?
Yeah, so, my background coming from digital marketing, selling for IBM and Google, everything was all about the science of maximizing multi-channel impressions to your audience. So we're big on figuring out what is the science of, what are the touch points, what are the channels, how often, what's the frequency, and I think you really have to map that out. Like, I think of it as like playing a game of chess. There's always the right move to make at what time to win the game, or poker. I'm a big poker player. So you always know like where you're at in the position on the poker table, the best hand to play, and I think the science of sales is just that. And then once you define all the channels, leverage them all, figure out how to best leverage them at what time. Is it a 12-step campaign, a 27-step campaign over the course of a duration of time? And then the execution is the art. What are you going to say on each touch point? What's the script for calls, voicemails, emails, social touches, video, texting? What are you going to say? Send me more info. I'm already working with someone. It's too expensive. I'm not interested. Call me back later. I need to talk to my boss. That's the science. Like, the science is the tone, the pit, or the art is all of that. Like how you say it, the scripting, the writing, and I think the tonality. Once you have the science down, leverage the art to execute and crush execution to really maximize your revenue, maximize your sales.
So I'll throw my 2 cents in here. There's a gentleman who is a partner at Emergence Capital named Gordon Ritter, and he talks about this symbiosis. I think he calls it coaching networks, wherein like the artistic innovation that happens in some of the processes that we do is done by people, right? So you have an SDR who figures out something creative, has a hypothesis about how you can go about it, and that's artistic, and it turns out it works. Then what we do is we systematize the crap out of that, right? And make sure that everybody is doing that thing and that they're doing it well and that they're doing it in high volume. So I think that's where kind of like I'm a process guy. One of my favorite books is The Goal. And so I like to have things processized, instrumented, such that they can be analyzed. But then the art part comes into what are the things that can be added to that they can then be processized. So that's kind of how I think. Like the art kind of informs the science and turns into like a scientifically instrumented process.
Can I riff on that just for a second?
Maybe. It's got to be short, though.
Got to be short. So one of the things, whether you're an SDR or an SDR manager out in the audience, at the end of every day, week, or month, I would say, there are enough stories that happen on your floor, on your team, in your company that can be sourced by the SDRs that are brand new information for your leadership team, for the rest of your company. There is no one else that is having this many touch points a day with your prospects, your potential prospects, or your customers. You are learning every single day about new things that are happening, new messages that are resonating well or not well, new events that you do that are working really great or not. Curate those stories and send a weekly or a monthly newsletter to your leadership team and help them, educate them on what is working, but also what is not working. Bring yourself into the marketing organization, make yourself relevant to the leadership team. They want to hear from you.
Okay, so let's talk about metrics. What's the weirdest metric that you track? Like we all, okay, calls, great, emails, account touch. Like these are all kind of like standard operating procedure. What's like the weirdest metric? Not just like weirdest for the sake of it being weird, but weirdest that is still like important, right? Like unintuitive, weird metric that actually ends up mattering. So Brandon, why don't we start with you if you have one?
Weird metrics. I don't know about weird metrics.
You can pass. It's okay.
No, I mean, like, let's just keep it stupid simple, KISS, right? Like, for me personally, I just think it's tracking all the outbound channels, tracking meetings booked to meetings held, tracking meetings held to close one. We stick to the core, and I have zero weird metrics.
It's okay.
All like what crushes quota.
You're right. One might pop up while we're presenting here. Mitch, you got any weird metrics you like to track?
Yeah, is John Seelig, are you in here?
Barrows?
John Seelig? No, not
no.
John Barrows. John Barrows is great, though. Well, I was having a conversation with a gentleman named John Seelig a few weeks ago, and he's a comedian, and he actually is beginning to work with salespeople so that he can actually work with them to infuse humor into their sales pitch.
Okay.
And out of that conversation, I was working with one of my SDRs who has this, it's a terrible joke.
Yeah.
And he references how many people, you'd be surprised how many people still sell like it's 1995, or like they still have a crystal pager,
right,
et cetera. And every time he says it, the prospect chuckles.
Right.
And they get he gets a silly little laugh out of it. And so I started to wonder.
Chuckles per hour.
How many chuckles, how many,
it's kind of awesome.
How many laughs does it take to get a first meeting?
Yeah. Dude, totally.
How many laughs does it take
to
get a qualified opportunity?
Yeah.
How much pipeline could you drive with some jokes? So if you're talking about weird, we're not measuring it yet. We haven't written a hypothesis about it yet.
I don't know if Chorus or Gong could instrument a chuckle.
If Gong or Chorus is in here, come find me after.
We want to create a tracker for chuckles. All right, Lars, weirdest metric, selling Cloudera or ArcSight stuff?
I'm pretty straight down the arrow too. We gamified, and I think you got to be careful. I think gamification and boards and TV screens and is okay, but I think you do have to be a little bit careful and very thoughtful of the behaviors you want to drive. I don't want anyone to feel like they've been shamed. I want people to be driven to want to be better themselves, not feel. So there's a part of the science that you can maybe go overboard with. So as far as weird metrics, no, we pretty much stayed down the lane.
Okay, so if we could instrument chuckles, you'd be like, no way, we're not putting that on the leaderboard?
No, I think that'd be funny.
Okay.
I think something that's not weird is tracking sentiment. I think it's really important to track
that's emergent.
Negative sentiment, positive sentiment, neutral sentiment. Yep. Yeah, okay, seeing a reply rate, that's great. Seeing a click, that's great. But what is the sentiment of the target audience that we're selling to? We started tracking that weird metric, and it's also hard to define. This is why Gong and Apollo and SalesLoft and Outreach are all trying to figure out automatically how to track sentiment because reading the text is hard to do. But I think that's something a little bit newer and different that really matters.
Yeah, and when I say weird, I mean not weird for the sake of it just being weird, but unintuitive, but potentially, but valuable. So I can give you guys some examples here. So obviously, open rate is all well and good, but you could potentially injure if you just have an obnoxious subject line that gets you good opens, but it turns out it's totally unrelated to your content or what have you, then someone's just going to archive that email really quickly. So I think, tracking all the things, so from opens to clicks to replies, and not just starting at replies, because a reply could be I
hate you.
Fuck off and die, or whatever. And instead, a better example of a more advanced reply rate would be, we call it email engagement rate, where we instrument the amount of back and forth that an SDR has with their prospects. So, because obviously if you're going back and forth, that's usually indicative of an actual conversation going on there. So that's that. I guess if your SDRs are doing If your SDRs are doing discovery calls as opposed to just like scheduled things, instrumenting meeting conversion rate is usually a pretty good thing. So ratio of first meetings to second meetings or third meetings, it can be a little more of like an AE metric. Those are some of the kind of like more advanced ones that I've seen. Okay, more metrics stuff. So we're talking about weird metrics and also straight down the line metrics that we're all really comfortable with, but not everybody is comfortable with with metrics. So how do you approach getting non-metrical people to comprehend and embrace analytics and metrics in a way that it directs their management? Because you can feed them metrics, but if they're not paying attention to them or not actioning them, it's not necessarily all that terribly valuable. So Lars, how many SDR managers did you guys have on that team?
6.
6. Okay, so you had a brood of managers that you were responsible for, and you couldn't be bird dogging everything on your own, so you needed to make sure that they were able to bird dog things. How did you empower them, or how did you empower them / make sure they were actually doing it? And if you had people who were like, I don't want to do it, I want to go by the seat of my pants, how did you address that? 1 minute.
Yeah, so we
only have 5
again,
minutes. Sorry.
KISS, keep it simple, stupid. We didn't go very far with respect to a lot of different metrics.
Yeah.
It was a booked, scheduled meeting. And we tuned the hiring engine for people that had no bad habits. They had no habits because they had very little experience out in the world. We took many of them, right out of school within their first 1 or 2 years, and we hired for people that were open to getting developed, getting mentored, getting coached. So people that skewed out of that lane didn't make it very far. And we learned how not to hire people that wanted to do things on their own. We had a very, very set, kind of scheduled way of doing things.
Okay, cool. How do we get, aside from working at SalesLoft to get your inside sales PhD, how do we help non-metrical people comprehend and appreciate sales metrics?
Sure, I think the short answer is help them understand why it's in their best interest.
Sure.
Help them understand how you're going to try to use these metrics to make them better. If they understand that you're investing in these metrics so you can invest in them, and you can create this reciprocity between you and the rep or you and the team, that's a pretty quick way to do it. And there's a couple things you can implement in order to sort of execute these. Obviously, you need to be doing these through one-on-ones, monthly reviews, quarterly reviews are great times to have these conversations. But in general, just help them understand why it's important that they look at these metrics and align their interests with measuring these and executing on them.
Got it. Actually, you were talking about one-on-ones and team meetings and things like that. Before we move on to Brandon, I'm gonna throw a new question in there. How do we make sure that people are actually consuming these things? So you talked about that. So like Brandon, how do you think about compelling people, making sure that it's in the operational cadence that people are actually consuming metrics such that they can action them?
Yeah, I think Mitch brings up a great point. Like, the first thing we do when we bring any SDR, AE on is we talk about revenue goals and income goals. Not everyone is cash driven, but a lot of people are, especially if you're in sales. So we try to figure out, okay, if your quota is $1 million and you're going to make 150K, well, let's do a stretch goal of 250,000 or 150,000, and then what is the annual behavior and KPIs to hit that, and then we break it down to monthly.
Yeah.
But like, to drive big results, it takes consistency, day in and day out. What are the daily activities that you need to do every day to hit that revenue number, to hit that income number? So we go backwards, forwards. What's the end cash goal or revenue goal? Then we figure out what are the daily KPIs, and then we track the daily KPIs via Salesforce dashboard that gets automatically imported via Slack and a Slack bot into like a sales KPI channel. So every day you've got the top of the funnel KPIs, like, hey, how many calls, emails, social touches, text videos are you supposed to do? How many meetings booked are you supposed to do? How many meetings held? And then, opportunities and revenue. We have this long Salesforce dashboard. At the end of every day at 6 p.m., it gets updated, sent to Slack, and everyone sees everyone's daily performance. I think it's wasteful to be meeting with your team every month. Like, if someone's underperforming 3 days in a row, we should probably help them to get back on track versus wait 30 days.
Yeah.
So I'm big in daily goals, daily execution, daily activity lead to the annual results where you want to go. And having it right in Slack or whatever you use to communicate across the team, creates leaderboards, creates, just that goal and accountability kind of system that you want everyone to be on.
I think having an intentional operational cadence is really important because, yes, having good visibility on a daily basis is fantastic, but I think it's also important that you have appropriate levels or appropriate time blocks. So yes, it's being distributed on a daily basis, but then on Fridays or Mondays or whatever, we come together and look at the last 5 days thing. And then at the end of the month, we look at that. And it gives you essentially breakpoints that is a forcing function for you to actually be able to say, look, this actually isn't working, or this is working, we can broadcast it around more. Are we done? Is that what that was? Okay, so you guys can find all of us online if you have any questions regarding the things that we talked about. I hope that was helpful, and thanks for listening.